If someone cut you off in traffic this morning, what would actually happen in your chest? Not what you wish would happen. Not what you'd write in your testimony on Sabbath morning. What actually happens? Because here's the thing. That moment, 3 seconds of road rage before you pull into the church parking lot, that moment is the sermon. Not the one you prepared. Not the one with the notes. The one your life preaches whether you want it to or not. And Lesson 12 goes right there, to the gap between what we say we believe and what leaks out when nobody's watching. The title is Share Him. 2 words, simple enough. But what this week's study actually asks is much harder. It asks, do you even have something worth sharing? And it asks it in a way that doesn't let you hide behind method. Let's get into it. The memory text for this week is the book of Isaiah 54. The Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary. He awakens me morning by morning. He awakens my ear to hear as the learned. Not a training program, not a crash course in evangelism, not a script. God is not giving the speaker a technique here. He's awakening an ear, morning by morning. The tongue of the learned comes second. The ear comes first. That distinction matters more than it sounds. We tend to approach witnessing as an output problem. We think, if I just knew the right words, the right approach, the right argument, then I could share. But Isaiah 50 says the whole mechanism begins upstream, in a morning, in quiet, in an ear that has been trained to hear. You can't give what you haven't received. That's the thesis of this entire lesson. Sunday, out of the overflow. The Great Commission in Matthew 28 is one of those passages we have heard so many times it can stop landing. We quote it, we put it on church signs, we build entire programs around it. But there's a word Jesus uses in Matthew 28 that deserves a longer look. In Greek, the word is pas. It shows up 4 times in 3 verses. All authority, all nations, all things, always, same root, same word, scattered through the mandate like a drumbeat. Jesus does not say some authority. He does not say some nations. He does not say when you feel like it. He says all, always, pas. That is not a casual commission. That is a total life restructuring. But here's what's interesting. The lesson makes a move that's easy to miss. It says true witnessing is often the result of being an eyewitness to what God is doing in your life. Not an argument, an experience. Think about the early church. Peter and John, not trained rabbis, not theological scholars, standing in front of the Sanhedrin, the most educated religious body in the world. And the council notices something strange. They realized that they had been with Jesus. That was the credential. Acts 4:20. We cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. Cannot but speak. Not we have decided to speak. Cannot but. The pressure is internal, not external. It's overflow, not obligation. You know the difference between someone doing their job and someone who can't help themselves. Same words, completely different energy. One you forget before you hit the parking lot. The other changes how you drive home. The difference is whether the message actually happened to them first. That's what Sunday is asking. Did it happen to you? Because if it did, the question isn't whether you'll share. Monday, unforced but with power. Monday has one of the most important concepts in the entire week, and it's buried in a contrast. Jesus was moved with compassion for the crowds. Matthew 9:36. They were weary and scattered, like sheep without a shepherd. And that compassion drove everything. The healing, the teaching, the long days, the crossing of the lake when everybody else wanted to sleep. But here's the contrast. The lesson is very deliberate about this. We should never try to force someone to accept God. And then it quotes Ellen White from The Desire of Ages, and the quote is sharp enough to leave a mark. She writes, "There can be no more conclusive evidence that we possess the spirit of Satan and the disposition to hurt and destroy those who do not appreciate our work, or who act contrary to our ideas." That is not gentle language. That is not a soft caution. She is saying that coercion, manipulation, pressure in the name of evangelism, that is not a minor failure. That is a categorical error about whose spirit you're operating in. God did not force Adam and Eve to stay away from the tree. He did not force people into the ark. He does not force us. He meets the need and then extends an invitation. So the witnessing posture is this: feel the burden, release the outcome. Jeremiah puts it another way. His word was in my heart like a burning fire shut up in my bones. I was weary of holding it back, and I could not. Jeremiah 29. That is not someone who was assigned to share. That is someone who is trying not to spontaneously combust. The fire is unforced, but it is real, and it is powerful. 2 Peter 3:18 is the question for today. How are you growing in grace and knowledge? Not as a doctrine, as a life, as something other people can see when they stand next to you. Because growth that isn't visible isn't actually growth, it's information, and information does not compel anyone. Tuesday, tips for sharing Jesus. Tuesday is practical, and I want to stay close to what the lesson actually offers because the structure here is good. The tips it gives for sharing Jesus are not a gimmick, they're a map of a relationship. Start with friendship, real, unstrategic interest in the person, not as a project, as a human being. Warmth, kindness, genuine curiosity. The lesson calls this being lovable, which is worth sitting with. Lovable, not persuasive, not compelling, lovable. Pray for them, specifically, not a general sweep of bless all my unsaved friends. Name them. Ask God to work on their heart in ways you can't manufacture. Look for natural moments to talk about your own faith. Not a presentation, a conversation. Here's what I'm learning. Here's what helped me this week. Something real, offer it simply. Find ways to connect them to community. This one is underrated. The gospel is not a one-on-one transaction. It's an invitation into a family, a small group, a social gathering, something where they can feel the texture of what it means to belong. And then, gradually, prayerfully, without rushing, move toward deeper conversations. One promise, one question answered, one door opened. Not a 12-week doctrine download on the first Tuesday. And here is the phrase from 1 Peter 3:15 that anchors all of it. Always be prepared to give a defense, an apologia, for the hope that is in you, with gentleness and respect. Gentleness and respect. Those aren't concessions to the culture. They're requirements for the method. Because the way we say the thing is part of what the thing is. All right, let's pause for a second. We've covered a lot. Sunday showed us that true witnessing begins with overflow, not obligation. Monday reminded us that the fire is unforced but real, and coercion is a sign we've lost the thread. Tuesday gave us a practical map of what friendship-based witness actually looks like. If any of that hit you, Wednesday and Thursday go somewhere deeper. And the detail in Thursday stopped me cold when I read it. Before we keep going, a quick word. These videos are here for anyone who wants to go deeper in the lesson, and they stay free because people like you watch, share, and support the channel. If this has been part of your Sabbath School preparation, consider becoming a member. Your support is what keeps this available everywhere in the world. We don't take that lightly. Thank you to those who are already partnering with us. All right, let's keep going. Wednesday, a wandering child. Wednesday shifts the lens. We've been talking about sharing Jesus with strangers, acquaintances, co-workers. Now the lesson turns to something that carries different weight entirely. The wandering child. Ephraim's story in Hosea is not a comfortable read. God's chosen people, raised in covenant, walking away from it. The language in Hosea 7 is blunt. Ephraim is mixed with the nations. Ephraim is like a half-baked cake, useful to nobody, nourishing nothing. And then Jeremiah 31 adds a layer that changes everything. Rachel is weeping for Ephraim. The metaphor runs deep. A grandmother, generations removed, still weeping over a child who walked away. And God responds to her tears with something unexpected. Not stop caring, not let it go. He says, refrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work shall be rewarded. There is hope in your future that your children shall come back. Hope in your future, your work shall be rewarded. Even when you cannot see it, even when they show no signs of returning, even when every year adds more distance. And then Jeremiah 31:20, and this is the part that stopped me. God says of Ephraim, is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a pleasant child? For though I spoke against him, I earnestly remember him still. Therefore my heart yearns for him. I will surely have mercy on him. My heart yearns for him. That is not a policy statement. That is a father. That is a God who does not merely track the wayward child as a category, status prodigal, but whose heart actually aches in the direction of the one who is gone. If you have someone in your life who has walked away from God, that verse is for you, not as a guarantee of outcome, as a description of who is still running toward them when you feel like you've run out of road. Thursday, bring them back. Zechariah 10 is a beautiful chapter. Read it slowly, the lesson says. I want you to hear just a few phrases. Ask the Lord for rain in the time of the latter rain. He will give it. The Lord of hosts will visit his flock. I will bring them back. I will strengthen them in the Lord. The posture of the entire chapter is return, restoration, God bringing his scattered people home. And here's what the lesson says about how we relate to loved ones who have left. The testimony of your life, your actions, your words, and your prayers for your spouse or child who has walked away can radically change their lives and future. And then the quote from Ellen White's Ministry of Healing. The strongest argument in favor of the gospel is a loving and lovable Christian. Not the sharpest argument, not the most thorough, the most loving. And now I want to go to the story that anchors Thursday for me, because it is the emotional payload of the whole week. John 21. Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, with an oath that he never knew him. The night of the trial, the rooster crowed, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. And a few days later, resurrected, Jesus is on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. He is cooking breakfast, over a charcoal fire, grilling fish. And here's the detail that people fly past. The last time John records that Peter was near a charcoal fire was in the courtyard of the high priest, on the night of the denial. The same kind of fire, the same smell in the air. And Jesus, knowing all of that, meets him there. Not in a throne room, not with a prepared indictment, not with a formal restoration ceremony. On a beach, with breakfast. For the man who swore he never knew him. That is what God is like. That is the character. And in Luke 22:31-32, we find out that Jesus had already prayed for Peter before the denial even happened. I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. When you have returned. Not if, when. That is the posture we are called to carry for those in our lives who have walked away. Not if they return, when. And until then, breakfast. Every morning, charcoal fire, waiting. Let me bring the week together. Sunday showed us that witnessing is never about technique first. It is about overflow from a life that has actually been changed. Monday gave us the fire of Jeremiah and the warning of Ellen White. Compulsion is not conviction, and the spirit of coercion is not the Spirit of God. Tuesday mapped out the practical shape of friendship evangelism: slow, intentional, prayerful, genuinely interested. Wednesday brought us to Rachel weeping and God saying, "My heart yearns for the one who is gone." Thursday took us to a charcoal fire on a beach and showed us what divine faithfulness actually looks like from the inside. Here is what I want you to carry out of this week. The person you are trying to reach, whether a stranger you see every day or a child who has stopped answering your calls, is being pursued by a God whose heart actually aches for them. Your job is not to close the gap. Your job is to be the kind of person whose presence points to a God worth returning to. So here's something practical. This week, pick one person, not a project, a person. Pray for them by name every morning. Not a long prayer, just, God, let them feel you today in a way they can't explain. Do it for 7 days. That's it. See what God does with the intercession, because Isaiah 50 said it first. He awakens my ear, morning by morning. The tongue of the learned comes second. It always does. The difference between a witness and a salesperson is the difference between someone who has been changed and someone who is selling change. One gives you information, the other gives you a reason to believe it's possible. If this gave you something, share it with someone who has a loved one they're still praying for. The one who needs to hear that God's heart still yearns for the wandering child. That hope in your future is a promise, not a platitude. We'll see you next week. Grace be with you.